The moment my boss picked up the microphone at the merger party, something in my chest went tight. He thanked the executives, the partners, the people whose titles filled entire email signatures. Then his gaze slid toward me like an afterthought that suddenly became useful. And this, he continued, smiling, is Layla Morgan, just support staff, no authority, no voice. Laughter spread fast, easy, comfortable. I stayed still. My name is Layla Morgan. I am 42 years old, and I have spent the last decade keeping integrations from collapsing, while people like him took credit for stability they never touched. He wasn't done. Layla handles the approvals, he added lightly. If anything goes wrong during integration, she signed off. A few heads nodded. Someone raised their glass. I leaned closer, barely moving my lips. That's not accurate. He didn't turn. Relax. It's a joke. A joke lands and disappears. This one was meant to stick. My phone vibrated once in my hand. Approval irregularities urgent. The timing was too clean to be coincidence. I looked up at him again. The confidence, the ease, the certainty that I would stay quiet, like I always had. He believed the room would remember the title he gave me, not the work I did. Behind me, someone whispered, "Support staff." I slipped the phone back into my pocket. No reaction, no correction. I stayed where I was and listened to the rest of his speech roll forward without me. Because humiliation is loud, but setups are careful, and people who feel safe enough to volunteer your name in public usually believe you cannot stop what comes next. The story you're about to hear is a fictional work created by the writing team at Revengeaita. Each story explores a different power imbalance and a different form of accountability. No two endings in this series are the same. By the time the applause faded, I understood the truth he was hiding behind humor. This merger wasn't about growth, it was about blame, and he had just decided where it would land. How does someone essential become invisible? By the time the party thinned and conversations broke into smaller clusters, I already knew what people would remember about me, not my name, not my role. Just the label my boss had handed them, support staff. I moved toward the edge of the room where the noise softened. A junior analyst from finance passed me and hesitated. "Hey, Layla, I didn't know you handled approvals too." "I handle the system," I answered. "The flow, the access, the timing." He blinked, processing that. "Oh, then, quieter. That sounds important." "It is," I said, and watched him drift away, already pulled back toward louder titles. I was never an assistant. I built the approval maps when the company outgrew its first acquisition. I controlled who touched which systems, when credentials expired, how handoffs happened between teams that barely spoke the same language. When something broke at 2 a.m, my phone rang. When it worked the next day, my boss stood in front of a slide and accepted congratulations. That had been the pattern for years. Once, during a smaller acquisition, I'd flagged a risk no one wanted to hear. He waved it off in the meeting. Later, when the issue surfaced anyway, he leaned into my doorway with a practiced sigh. Next time, bring it to me sooner. I had brought it to him. He just preferred the version where I was at fault. The merger made everything sharper. More money, more pressure, more incentive to make sure the damage landed somewhere safe. I crossed paths with him near the bar. He didn't slow down. "Good job tonight," he said, already looking past me. "You handled that well." "What part?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Was I supposed to handle? He paused, surprised by the question. "You know what I mean. Being flexible, quiet, useful." That was why he chose me. I didn't challenge him in public. I fixed problems before they reached his desk. I absorbed blame without making noise. As I watched him laugh with the people who would decide his future, the realization settled in fully. In this merger, I wasn't just overlooked. I was convenient. And that was something I understood very well. What if the first person who doubts the story isn't on your side or theirs? I felt it before I heard my name. Layla. The voice came from behind me, low and careful. I turned to see a man I recognized from earlier meetings but had never spoken to directly. Gray suit, neutral expression, the kind of presence designed not to attract attention. "I'm Daniel," he said, compliance, acquiring firm. I waited. He leaned closer, just enough to keep the conversation private. "I need to ask you something, and I need you not to answer it out loud. My shoulders tightened. Go on. Did you approve the final integration access changes last Friday? No. He nodded once, like he'd expected that. Then we have a problem. The words landed heavier than the music still humming behind us. He continued. Your name appears on 3 approvals, different times, different systems. The logs don't match the activity. I wasn't even in the office, I replied. I was on site with the data migration team. I know, he said. That's why I'm here. I studied his face, searching for accusation. There was none, just restraint. Professional concern. I'm not accusing you of anything, he added. But someone is using your authority. And if this closes the way it's headed, that trail ends with you. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. I didn't look. Why tell me, I asked. Because I don't like stories that fall apart under audit, he said. And because once the paperwork is final, intentions stop mattering. A group laughed nearby. Someone called my boss's name. Daniel straightened. Already stepping back. Check your access history, he said quietly. And whatever you find, document it. Don't confront anyone yet. Are you telling anyone else? Not until I see what you see. He walked away without another word. I stood there, the room suddenly distant. Embarrassment had been one thing. This was different. This carried consequences, investigations, liability, a version of my name I wouldn't recognize attached to decisions I never made. I pulled out my phone and opened the email I'd ignored earlier. Approval irregularities, urgent. I understood the shift immediately. This was no longer about perception. It was about proof. Why does silence always come with a deadline? He caught me near the elevators, already holding a folder like it had been waiting for me all evening. Let's step aside, he said, steering without touching. This won't take long. Inside the folder. The pages were crisp, too crisp. A severance package, he continued, flipping to the signature line. Clean exit, professional. Protects everyone. Everyone, I repeated, scanning the language. He nodded, relieved by the echo. Exactly. We're moving fast, Layla. Emotions are high, no reason to complicate things. I reached the page with the non-disclosure agreement. Broad, permanent, silent. This needs to be signed by morning, he added. Like it was a courtesy. Legal wants it wrapped up. By morning, I said. That's quick. He smiled. That's mergers. I closed the folder. What happens if I don't? His smile thinned. Then we all have to answer questions we don't need. Questions. The word hovered between us. You told people I signed off on approvals. I said, I didn't. He waved it away. You managed the process. Same thing. It isn't. He leaned in, lowering his voice. Layla, you're very good at what you do. That's why this works. But this deal closes in 48 hours. After that, the story is the story. Whose story? I asked. Our story, he said quickly. The company's. I thought of Daniel's warning, of logs that didn't match, of my name stamped on decisions I never made. You're asking me to disappear, I said. I'm offering you a soft landing, with a gag order, with protection, he corrected, for everyone. I slid the folder back toward him. I'll have my attorney review it. The room shifted. Not loudly. Just enough. There's no time for that, he said. This is standard. So is due process. He stared at me, measuring. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I met his eyes. I'm not the one setting deadlines. He gathered the folder, his movements sharper now. Morning, he said again. That's the window. He walked away believing the schedule would do the work for him. I stood there, already counting the hours he thought belonged to him. What if the leverage you hid was the only thing that mattered? I didn't go home after the offer. I went back to my desk, logged in, and pulled up the documents I hadn't opened in years. Employee stock ownership, accumulated quietly, quarter by quarter, signed when the company was smaller, riskier, less impressive. I'd never talked about it because I didn't want to be treated like a threat. I wanted my work to stand on its own. My phone rang. Layla, a familiar voice said, older, steady. I heard there was noise tonight. It was Arthur Hale, the founder, retired, but still watching. He'd called me before, usually to ask how things were actually running. There was, I replied, and it wasn't harmless. A pause. Are they trying to move you out before closing? Yes. Another pause. Shorter this time. Then check your proxy file. I already am. Good, he said. I granted you temporary voting authority for the merger period. I told legal you were the only one who understood the systems well enough to know when something wasn't right. I never used it, I said. I hoped you wouldn't need to, he answered. But hoping doesn't close gaps. I opened the proxy agreement. The language was precise, limited, legal, enough. With that authority, he continued, you can request a hold if there's a material risk, misrepresentation, credential misuse, anything that could expose the company after close. I thought of the approvals, the logs, the urgency wrapped in a smile. They told me I had no authority. I said. Arthur exhaled. People confuse volume with power. I didn't want protection. I admitted. I wanted respect. You earned respect, he said. You just didn't advertise it. I closed the document and sat back. For years, I'd treated that file like a last resort, something that existed but didn't belong to me unless everything else failed. Everything else had failed. Arthur's voice softened. Whatever you decide, document it. Do it clean. Let the process speak. I will. The call ended. The office was quiet. My screen wasn't. I wasn't angry. I wasn't afraid. I felt something steadier settle in place. I had never used that power because I didn't want to change how people looked at me. Now, I was ready to change what they could do. What's more dangerous, anger or proof I didn't confront anyone? I didn't send a warning email or demand an explanation. I opened the systems instead. Access logs first, then timestamps, then credential histories that told a cleaner story than any meeting ever had. My name appeared where my badge never had. Late hours. Remote approvals routed through an administrative pathway I did not control. I called IT security and asked for a read-only export. No urgency in my voice. No accusations. Scope, the analyst asked. Integration approvals for the last 2 weeks, I replied. User attribution and access points. A pause. Keys clicking. That's specific. It needs to be within minutes. The file landed in my inbox. I layered it against my calendar, then against building access, then against the project tracker I maintained for everyone else. The timeline aligned in only one direction. I forwarded the packet to the audit committee's intake address with a short cover note. 3 sentences. Neutral language. Attached exhibits labeled clearly. An hour later, my phone rang. This is Marisol Chen, a voice said. Audit committee, I'm available. I replied. We received your submission, she continued. You're not alleging misconduct. I'm documenting risk. Silence. Then, you're requesting a hold. Yes. Under proxy authority. Yes. Another pause. Longer. We'll need to verify the access anomalies. I've included the logs. You have, she said. Will involve IT and legal. I understand. She lowered her voice slightly. You should know this will freeze activity. That's the point. We'll notify leadership. You don't need to, I said. They already know there's a deadline. She exhaled. All right. You'll receive confirmation shortly. The call ended without ceremony. I leaned back and watched the status update change from pending to under review. No raised voices, no drama, just a system doing exactly what it was designed to do once someone stopped protecting the wrong assumptions. My phone buzzed again, a message from my boss. We need to talk, now. I didn't respond. The process was already moving. What if your enemy underestimates you one last time? The pre-closing meeting moved fast, like it always did when people believed the ending was guaranteed. My boss took the lead without looking in my direction. We're aligned, he said. Legal has reviewed. Integration is ready. We're on track to finalize today. A partner from the acquiring firm glanced at the agenda. There was a note about a temporary hold. He smiled. Procedural noise, support level confusion, already handled. I felt the room tilt slightly toward him. He continued, warming to the sound of his own certainty. There's no reason to slow this down. We've all invested too much time, too much trust. Marisol from audit spoke carefully. We are verifying an access anomaly, he waved a hand, which has nothing to do with authority. Layla doesn't have the power to delay anything. A few people nodded. Someone closed a laptop. I stayed still. He turned to the group. Let's proceed with signatures. Legal began passing folders down the table. Pens followed. The sound was small but final. Before we do, Marisol said. We need to confirm there's nothing to confirm. My boss cut in. We're past that. He looked at me then, finally. The look he used when he expected compliance, silence, gratitude for being included at all. Layla, he said, softening his tone. You're good at details. This part is bigger than details. I agree, I replied. A few heads turned. He frowned. Then we're aligned. I placed my hands on the table. Not yet. The room went quiet. Not all at once, but enough. Legal paused mid-motion. Marisol stopped speaking. The partner from the acquiring firm leaned back, watching. My boss's voice sharpened. This isn't your call. It is today, I said. He laughed once, short and dismissive. You don't have that authority. I met his gaze and didn't look away. You assumed I wouldn't use it. The pen stopped moving. The folders remained open. The deal waited, balanced on a silence he had mistaken for consent. What happens when the quietest person speaks last? I'm invoking my proxy authority, I said, keeping my voice even, effective, immediately. The words landed without force, but they stopped everything. Legal looked up first. Layla. Can you clarify the scope? Yes, I replied. I'm placing the merger on hold, pending verification of access anomalies tied to approvals bearing my name. My boss leaned back in his chair. This is absurd. Marisol from audit didn't look at him. We received the documentation, he scoffed. Documentation doesn't equal authority. Legal opened the file I had sent hours earlier. Proxy confirmation is valid, she said, eyes moving quickly. Temporary voting rights during the merger window. My boss's smile didn't move. That doesn't give her. It gives her exactly this. Legal said, cutting in. A procedural stop. IT security joined the line. We've confirmed credential misuse, the analyst reported. Administrative access routed through a secondary pathway. The approvals were not executed by Layla Morgan. Silence settled, heavier now. The partner from the acquiring firm spoke carefully. Then we cannot proceed. My boss's chair scraped the floor as he stood. This is a misunderstanding. We can resolve it offline. Marisol shook her head. Not anymore. Legal closed the folder. All signing is frozen. He turned to me, anger flashing through the certainty he'd worn all day. You could have come to me. I did. I said, more than once. That's not the point. It is. I answered. You used my name because you thought it was safe. Security stepped closer to the table. Sir, one of them said, we need to pause this session. My boss looked around, searching for support that wasn't there. You're making a mistake, he said, quieter now. Legal stood. We'll continue this after internal review. He was escorted out without ceremony. No raised voices, no spectacle. Just the sudden absence of the person who had assumed control was permanent. The room exhaled. I gathered my papers and remained seated. The hold had been recorded. The system reflected it in real time. The merger would wait. And for the first time since my name had been offered up as cover, it waited because I said it would. Is losing power worse than losing reputation? They didn't announce his termination in a meeting. There was no dramatic email. His name simply disappeared from the calendar invites first, then from the leadership directory. By the third day, it was official. Marisol called me into a small conference room. Legal was already there. Folders closed, expressions neutral. He's been terminated for cause. She said, misrepresentation, retaliation, and misuse of credentials. Legal added, the board has also agreed to a non-compete clause. He will not hold an executive role in this industry for several years. I nodded once. No satisfaction, just acknowledgement. The merger, the acquiring firm's representative said, is being renegotiated. With conditions, Marisol clarified. Employee protections, audit oversight, clear separation of system access. Legal slid a document across the table, and this corrects the record. Your name is formally cleared. The approvals were falsified. That finding will stand. I read the language carefully, precise, final. Later that afternoon, I passed him in the hallway outside HR. He looked smaller without the room bending toward him. You didn't have to do it like this, he said. I didn't do it, I replied. You did. He scoffed weakly. You think this makes you important. I think it makes things accurate. He searched my face, then looked away. Enjoy your win. It wasn't a game, I said. It was my name. He had no answer for that. The following week, an internal memo went out. Short, clear, No apologies, just facts. Layla Morgan had not approved the flagged actions. Layla Morgan had raised the issue through proper channels. The company thanked her for her diligence. A colleague stopped me near the elevators. "I didn't know you could do that," she said. "Neither did he," I answered. The world kept moving. Titles shifted. Processes changed. I stayed where I was, steady in the space that had finally stopped tilting against me. The fight was over, but my work was not. What does power look like after you stop hiding it? The offer came in a short meeting with legal and audit. No ceremony, no applause. "We want you to oversee post-merger systems governance," Marisol said. "Direct access, independent reporting, final authority on approvals." I nodded. With separation of credentials, yes, legal added, and audit-triggered freezes. No single executive override. "That stays," I said. "If my name is on a decision, the trail has to be clean." "It will be," Marisol replied. "That's why this role exists." Later, I met the team who would report to me, a mix of engineers and analysts who had learned to keep their heads down. One of them spoke first. "So, what changes?" I didn't raise my voice. "We document ownership, we rotate access, we log every exception. And if anyone pressures you to shortcut, you come to me." A pause, then relief. Another meeting followed, this one with the acquiring firm. Their representative leaned back, studying the framework I'd drafted. "This would have caught the misuse weeks earlier. That's the point," I said. "Protection shouldn't depend on who's popular." He smiled. "You don't sound like support staff. I never was." The work settled into a rhythm. Fewer surprises, fewer late-night fixes, more accountability where it belonged. People stopped whispering. Processes started speaking for themselves. I passed the old conference room once. Empty now. The place where my name had been volunteered. The place where silence had been mistaken for consent. At the end of the week, Arthur called. "You did it clean," he said. "That matters. It had to be." I answered. Anything else would have been noise. When I hung up, I felt the weight lift, not because I'd won, but because the rules finally worked the way they were supposed to. Life lesson power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits in the quiet places built through patience, protected by proof, and used only when the truth needs a witness. They told me I had no authority, no voice. They were wrong. I was just waiting to use it.